Now let's look at something that's a bit more severe. This one is a night shot. We've got blown out highlights in the headlamps, but that's okay, we don't worry about that. I'll turn that warning off. Of course those are blown out because this is a night shot and they actually should be bright, completely white. This is shot under sodium vapor lamps and they've given it a very strong orange look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use, on the basic tab, the first step will be to set the white balance with the white balance tool. So I've got this eyedropper and I'm going to put it on something white, and I know that this line here is white even though it looks yellow. Click on it. Straight away Photoshop has reset the white balance. It's had to take the temperature all the way down to compensate for that sodium look. I know what lens we were using here. I'm going to go straight to the lens correction tab because there are some changes I want to make right at the start. Profile. Enable lens profile correction. Now in this case, Camera Raw knows what lens it was. It knows it was a 20mm Canon f2.8, and it can correct that. It can make corrections around that. Let's just look at that again. You see what's happening is that Adobe Camera Raw knows that the lens distorts somewhat, and it knows about it wants to get that line straight, and so it has already got a profile in there, and it lightens the edges, the corners, and fixes the distortion. And this is like a one-stop shop for getting the image starting off really nicely. From here, let's look at straightening things. Now, we could use the straighten tool. We could just draw a line on this to straighten it. But really, this is a downward-looking image. Let's see what if I look. If I hit enter, that's what that would come out. That's just. But I don't think it matters whether this is up or down or not, because the whole image is kind of skewed a bit. If this is correct, because we're looking down somewhat. When you have a vertical and you're looking straight at it, it's really important to have that vertical, it's up and down. But when you're looking down, things can shift around quite a lot. Let's hit the crop tool. Now we can see what we've cropped, and I'm just going to manually, if I drag this outside, you see the shape of the cursor, it will allow me to select that where I want it to go, and then I can use the corner points to adjust where the corners are. And I don't really want this stuff in at the top. I prefer the claustrophobic look. So I could have all that in it, but I'm just going to take that down to there and keep all that messy stuff at the top off. Hit enter. And now our attention is focused more down here to this car. The look is not particularly inspiring at the moment. I think we need to do some work on that. Now, here we have a histogram which is favouring the dark tones. Let's just... Now, when you're adjusting the exposure, you should be looking at the midtones. As I bring this up, it's starting to look washed out. I think by eye, I want to leave it back where it was. A slight increase perhaps. Exposure is about midtones. Contrast is about midtones. These ones are about the extremes. If we give it a slight increase in contrast, not too much. Just a subtle one. Shadows. Well, I think we're just going to look and see what happens if we darken them. But really, it's mainly affecting this area over here, and I think I'd rather have that dark. And blacks. I want to bring those down a little bit because it's increasing the contrast in a way that I particularly like. In terms of highlights, no, I just want that at 0. And the whites, this is really what's going to affect the whites. We're not going to try and recover detail in those highlights. I don't really want to go extreme with that either. 0 for that one. We can't recover detail in the headlights because the detail's long gone. That would look wrong if we did have detail in there. Let's punch up the clarity. Too much, and back it off until Now this was shot at 128,000 ISO, which on most cameras I wouldn't dare try, but on a 6D it's a reasonable option. Let's look at the detail tab and see how bad the noise is. We need to go to 100%. And now you can see the noise in the mid-tones. Typically with this camera there's very little noise in the blacks, but the mid-tones can be quite noisy. Let's put this in the middle. We don't want to go too much. Let's bring the color noise up quite a long way and remove the color detail. And again, we're just concerned about balancing the smearing effect. Now, that's pretty much dealt to the noise. If I go back to fit and view, it's just a bit too much to me. That to me looks worse than the noise. The noise for this particular model of camera is not too objectionable. It looks pretty much like, to me, it looks quite like grain. So I'm going to remove the reduction, increase the detail, bring this back as well. And that's probably a reasonable compromise to my way of thinking. There's a bit more there than a standard, but it's not too severe. And I think when we look at that back at 100, back at fit and view, I'm not seeing too much of the noise. It still has that slightly smeared look though, because it's got such a lot of gritty textures in it. I think we need those gritty textures. So I'm going to go back to 100% and I'm going to back that off again. Maybe if I leave the detail up and increase the noise. Okay, now let's try that. Can I see the noise reduction at fit and view? Well, it's a lot nicer. Let's see, what do we do with the clarity? We bumped the clarity up. Let's try the clarity up a little bit more, which will work against the noise reduction. I think that's not looking too bad. Let's go here and we'll add a vignette, because there's a lot of stuff around the edges that we don't really want to look at. Let's focus our attention on this area here. I'm pleased with that starting to look a bit better. Now, what we could do is we could come back here. Let's bring a little bit of that orange back in, and now we'll go to the hue, saturation and lightness, and we'll desaturate the yellows and the oranges, and that will give us a more natural look, I think, because we kind of almost expect to see a little bit of orange in there, and by desaturating those colours specifically we haven't interfered with the other colours we have, and that's much more the way I'd like to see it. Right, okay, that's that one done. Now what you will notice here is this is slightly out of focus, because I'm operating this one at f3.5, so because it's dark I've opened the aperture up and then gone back one click just to stay away from the maximum aperture, and this means that there isn't enough depth of field to get both the distant parts in focus as well as this rail in the foreground, yet these parts down here are actually okay. What I would do is I would take this into Photoshop and I would do something over here to mask this, to remove the look of lack of focus there. But that's the job of Photoshop. We've got the camera raw work done, but now the Photoshop work needs to be done just to clear that bit up.